recent years, the isekai, or otherworld genre, has become increasingly popular in anime, manga, video games, and light novels. Although many people think this genre is a new fad, it actually has a pretty long and interesting history. I'm just gonna stick on the eastern side of things for this video. I won't be mentioning time shift stories, as those still take place in our world. The isekai genre, also known as portal fantasy in the West, is characterized by a protagonist who is transported to a fantastical place, and the struggles that person must face in that place. The isekai genre finds its origins in Japanese fairy tales. The most prominent of these is the tale Urashima Taro. In this story, a fisherman rescues a turtle from some unruly children. As a reward, the fisherman is transported to an underwater kingdom. After hanging out with the turtle, who is transformed into the kingdom's beautiful princess, the fisherman decides to return home, only to find that well over a century has passed since he left. The story features all the tropes of the modern isekai genre, such as the everyman protagonist and the fantastical world. This tale also highlights the consequences of returning from the fantasy world. Although other notable isekai and portal fantasy stories were created after the folktales, such as Alice in Wonderland, it wouldn't be until the 20th century when the genre would begin to advance. Also, as a side note, in 1918, Urashima Taro was adapted into one of the first anime films, so isekai has been in anime since the beginning. The first modern isekai isn't actually a proper isekai, but a reverse isekai. A reverse isekai is when a protagonist from another world is sent to our own world. This 1966 anime, called Sally and the Witch, is about a witch named Sally and her brother Cub, who run away to the human world. Sally and Cub meet some girls, and they go on adventures and stuff. This anime is important, not only because it was the first prominent reverse isekai, but it was also the first shoujo anime, or anime targeted towards the younger girl demographic. The concept of a magical girl coming to our world would remain a staple in the magical girl genre for years to come. The earliest modern isekai I could find was Warrior from Another World, which was a novel written in 1976. This story is about a high school student who is summoned to battle a demon king. Sounds kind of generic by today's standards. The first modern isekai anime is Aura Blaster Divine. This story features an 18-year-old kid who is summoned to a medieval fantasy world. This kid, whose name is Sho, has to pilot mechs in a resistance movement against a tyrannical ruler. This anime is adapted from the 1983 novel series Wings of Rain, which has nothing to do with the mechas. From what I could find, they were added to the anime adaptation due to sponsors wanting them to be in the show. During the next few years, nothing really major happened to the isekai genre. A few novels and anime came out, but things didn't really change until 1986. That year, the Super Mario Bros. Movie came out. It introduced the trap in a video game concept, which would really define the genre a few decades later. Another noteworthy Izakayas Story was released that year, Leda. This movie featured a college girl who had ESP. The movie focused on the protagonist's inner struggle, as well as her struggle to vanquish evil from the world she was summoned to. This anime really introduced superpowers to the isekai genre, which would become a large feature later on. In the 90s, there was kind of an isekai boom. Many isekai stories from the 90s were similar to Leda, being about young women or girls who were transported to another world, where they would often be espers. These stories focused both on romance, featuring male tsundere, love triangles, and enemy-to-lover plotlines. The most prominent and innovative was Fugishi Yugi, which was about two girls who are transported to another world via a book. One of the girls becomes the hero of the world, while the other becomes a villain. On the other side of the coin, there were many isekai stories where young men and boys would be transported to another world, trying to vanquish evil. There were a lot of isekai anime, OVAs, novels, and manga during this time that really pushed the genre further. It is important to note that, although not really an isekai, Yu Hakusho was the first anime to really have the protagonist killed by a truck trope. Similarly, I know someone will bring this up, but Inuyasha is more of like a time shift story than an isekai. So despite its significance to the medium, I don't want to talk about it too much. It is important though in how it brought both the shoujo and the shonen audiences together, and it introduced a lot of isekai tropes to a larger audience. In the late 90s, Digimon and Corrector Yui were created, which brought up the idea of people being transported to a digital world. Although not an isekai, the 1999 anime Serial Experiments Lain would also expand on this idea. The next big breakthrough in the isekai genre would occur in 2001, when the Studio Ghibli movie Spirited Away took the world by storm. This movie featured a young girl who worked to free her parents and herself from a world they were transported to. This movie was a worldwide hit, and introduced the Japanese isekai genre to people all around the world. 1 year later, the anime .hack was released. This anime was what really mixed gaming, with MMORPGs in particular, with the isekai genre. In this anime, a gamer gets trapped in an MMORPG, and he has to focus on surviving and figure out how to get out of the game. Overall, the anime's kinda bland, but it did set the precedent for MMORPG type anime in the future. Later that year, the infamous isekai story Sword Art Online was written. This web novel was about a group of gamers who became trapped in a virtual reality game known as Sword Art Online. Despite being written in 2002, Sword Art Online would not explode in popularity until its anime adaptation a decade later. By the end of the 2000s, most isekai tropes were set in stone. Influential works like Mar and Familiar of Zero really solidified these tropes, but it wouldn't be until the 2010s when we would really see a resurgence of the isekai genre. Although isekai series, especially light novels, were being created during the 2000s, it wasn't until the Sword Art Online anime adaptation came out that things would begin to change. Sword Art Online was about some gamers who were trapped in an MMORPG. If they died in the video game, they would die in real life. Sword Art Online had it all: the fantastical world, the video game elements, the overpowered protagonist, and the harem. One of the reasons that the isekai genre flourished so much around this time was due to the escapism it provided. As the neat and shut-in populations rose, the demand for escapism-related content grew, and isekai stories easily provided that escapism. This is because isekai stories of this time took an everyman character, someone who was just like the reader or viewer, and put them in a video game-esque fantasy world. These isekai stories were characteristically power fantasies that had themes of second chances, redemption, and revenge. Readers and viewers were able to live through the characters they loved. Stories like Saga of Tanya the Evil and Knights and Magic emphasized the reincarnation element of isekai stories, where protagonists would pass away before being given a second chance at life. Gimmicks became a large part of isekai stories at the time, whether it be the protagonist being reincarnated as a monster or an object, or having some unique power or mindset. Reverse isekai stories were also pretty popular, with the largest one being The Devil is a Part-Timer. Parody stories like Konosuba also emerged. As time went on, the genre became oversaturated, and people became fed up with isekai stories. Although there is still a pretty big audience for this type of content, the popularity has vastly decreased, with some publishing companies even refusing to accept isekai content. And that's it for the history of isekai. If I didn't mention your favorite, sorry. There are just so many isekai stories that there was no way I could mention them all. So I just stuck with the most influential or things that I thought would be most important. I also didn't really know where to put this, but a lot of isekai authors got their start by writing the Familiar of Zero fanfiction. Stuff like ReZero came out of that community. Thank you for watching and all of your recent support. All the nice stuff you guys say really means a lot to me. Later, gamers.